This presentation is a brief summary of the concepts of period, cohort, and age effects in longitudinal data. When we're looking at our data, we have to think in terms of what was happening at the time. What was the period effect? What was the cohort experience, the group that we're studying? And what kind of changes do we see that are age-related? So we talk about these as period, cohort, and age effects. More specifically, the results we see are a mix of period, cohort, and age effects. So think of the period effect of 1996. Globalization was the word. And that meant globalization of the food supply. There was an economic boom. But then in 2008, there was the stock market crash, which was a bust. And all of this happened over growing trends of an emerging obesogenic environment. So the cohort that we're looking at, this was a group of young people at the cusp between the Gen X and millennial cohorts. And the age effect that we're following is a shift from adolescence to early adulthood at a time when they were experiencing the period effect of the obesogenic environment. So digging more deeply into the period effects, we're talking about the time between 1996 to 2008. So what were the major period effects? You have economic growth in 1996, and you have a stock market fall in 2008. Globally, there were rapid shifts to cardiovascular disease risk factors. So cardiovascular disease was increasing, and it became a disease of poverty at this time period. We had greater disparities in health, and some of this had to do with poverty issues, and some of it had to do with healthy habits that were emerging in the very wealthy populations. At the same time, in this time period, we had stigmatization of overweight and obesity, while healthy food and active lifestyles become more expensive. Now, the cohort experience of this group, remember, these are adolescents in 1996 and young adults in 2008. This group of young people will have experienced September 11th as a formative experience in their very early adulthood. Between 1996 and 2008, for that whole period, healthcare access was a major political issue. It was an issue that was raised in the Clinton administration and was also raised by Barack Obama, but Obamacare was not yet enacted in 2008 and was a major issue that was being discussed politically. The food supply at that time and over that time period was more processed than ever before, and activity patterns were increasingly sedentary. Because of safety concerns, fewer people were walking, and let's not forget the stock market crash in 2008. And here we talk about that as being a formative experience for the cohort, even though it affected the cohort well beyond the study period. The adolescent to early adulthood age effect will have an influence on your data in that you will expect to see weight gain. So BMI will increase in early adulthood, cardiovascular disease will start to emerge, young people, young adults will find it difficult to maintain healthy lifestyles because very often young adults are becoming parents, and the time constraints make it harder to maintain healthy patterns. In addition, at this particular time period, healthcare access was a major issue. They had more limited access to healthcare depending on their employment, and this is something that's combined with a cohort effect because in 2008 was before Obamacare regulations were enacted. So how does all of this relate to your data? Well, just remember what's happening at that time, the period effect of 2008. That was when the economic crisis was in full swing. At the same time, researchers were reporting on the obesity epidemic that was growing very rapidly. In addition, this is a cohort where their life experience of this period effect was at a time when they were early in their careers or even looking for a job. So looking for a job at a time of economic crisis meant having limited access to health care and limited resources for healthy behaviors. The other thing to remember is that this group of young people were adults in the 2008 survey. So that's when hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, and cardiovascular risk factors emerge. So it's important to remember that when you see relationships between adolescents and the final survey, 2008, that a lot of things changed in between those time periods, and that the final survey was taken in the midst of an economic crisis when cardiovascular risk factors were at their height.